episode of the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. It's a bonus episode,
Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and we are going to talk about something completely different today. Over on the YouTube channel, a while back, I did a video dealing with the historical question of the identity of Darius the Mede, a character mentioned in Daniel. More on that in just a second. And I had said that, hey, you should go over to the podcast. If you're not listening to the podcast yet, you should listen to the podcast. The podcast is kind of where it's at. And it looks like a bunch of people came over. So if you are new here and you came from that Darius the Mede video over on the YouTube channel, welcome. I'm super glad that you are here. I asked for your opinions on the identity of Darius the Mede. And in this conversation, I want to look at some of your responses as promised. But first, just to get everybody back up to speed, let me set up the problem and lay that out again so we know what we're talking about here. So for those of you who didn't watch the video, the super quick version is that in the middle of Daniel, the city of Babylon flips from being owned by the Babylonians to being owned by the Persians, or the Medo-Persian Empire. So Cyrus the Great topples the Babylonian Empire and city controlled by a dude named Nabonidus. And the text records that as happening all in one night while a big banquet is happening with Belshazzar, who was ruling Babylon itself, while his dad, Nabonidus, was ruling the larger area. That's where you get the famous writing on the wall scene in Daniel chapter 5. And then sure enough, that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, the city of Babylon, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Well, that begs the question, who was Darius the Mede? And there are a lot of different theories on that. There are also different theories on how to pronounce Darius. Some people like to say Darius. That's particularly popular with people who have an English accent. I don't know. They both sound real good to me. So whatever you're into, Darius, who was this guy? And you weighed in with a bunch of theories, responded to some of the theories I threw out. The idea that Darius the Mede might be Gobryas, that is a commander that we have documented from a bunch of other sources who worked with Cyrus the Great, the Persian conqueror, and people by that same name, or maybe even the same guy, factor into some later episodes that involve Cyrus's kids and how things shook out in a very dramatic way with them. So maybe it's just another name for Gobryas, who was a Mede. Maybe Darius the Mede is another name for Cyaxares, a Median king who we talked about in that YouTube video as well. Some people have argued that Darius the Mede is just another name for Cyrus the Great himself. We talked about all of the problems and all the strengths with all of these. Additionally, I made the point that maybe Darius the Mede is just Darius the Mede. I don't know, this isn't a completely well-documented moment in history. And the Persians seemed to have a vested interest in coming generations in moving on from the Medes and just having it be more of the Persian Empire. So given a bunch of the political and court intrigue that happened around the throne in the coming decades, which I didn't have time to talk about in the YouTube video, but which we will discuss at great length once we finish up the book of Matthew and move into our conversation about the book of Esther. There were all these shenanigans. A whole bunch of stuff happened. And that, to me, further solidifies that anybody who was a Mede and played a part in all of this would have been minimized by historical records. So again, maybe Darius the Mede was just Darius the Mede, and history doesn't keep a record of him. His name didn't pass down to us, and only Daniel even lets us know that there was a guy like that who governed one of these regions centered around Babylon. I suppose the other possibility is Daniel just got it wrong. We talked about that one as well. And then the other possibility is just wait, because historical biblical claims about big extra biblical history stuff where the story of the Bible overlaps with extra biblical history, it keeps getting vindicated. It just keeps working out with time, and all the things that people through the centuries have looked at and been like, the Bible's fake because it's just wrong on that. They keep getting uncovered, and it keeps working out. Now, the miraculous claims, it's a little bit tougher because those things are more difficult to duplicate, reproduce, dig out of a hole in the desert. And so that's an entirely different conversation as to how those things will or won't be vindicated. But I think there's a reasonable chance that the Darius the Mede thing is going to come to light. All of that said, I had mentioned that what I wanted to do was interact with some of my favorite theories or comments from that. So welcome to all of you who are here and came over from that particular video. Here were some of my favorite theories. Rock and Sand Apologetics writes, Daniel called him Darius the Mede, while others referred to him as King Darius. I believe Daniel was making a point here. If we remember the dream of Nebuchadnezzar about the statue whose head was of gold, arms of silver, etc., we realize Daniel was referring to the divided kingdom that would defeat Babylon. That divided kingdom being, of course, the Medes and the Persians. I don't know if we're necessarily talking about the same King Darius as Darius the Mede here, but I appreciate the way that comment connects it back to Daniel's emphasis on the divided kingdom and therefore his desire to heavily emphasize the presence of the Medes in that as well. Maybe that sheds some light on what we're doing here. David Koizis, apologies if I got your last name pronounced wrong there, friend, writes that the fact that the biblical figures cannot be found in surviving records outside the Bible does not mean that they don't exist. So it sounds like David is advocating for the wait and see approach. I thought this one was interesting. Excellence Adegun writes, yes, I've been searching for this for a year. Oh man, I'm so grateful for this video. Well, I mean, first of all, I appreciate the enthusiasm. I'm still 2 minutes in, so this is untainted by my ideas. So this is exciting. Let's see what we got. But I'm looking forward to what you say. I kind of concluded that Darius the Mede was most likely a governor under Cyrus who came to claim the conquest of his campaign a year or two later. So I think what he's saying is that Cyrus came to claim the conquest of his campaign in Babylon, and Darius the Mede handled his business. Oh, there's an edit. Wait, there's an edit. Excellence Adegun goes on to say, I kind of surmised that Darius the Mede was Gobrius, maybe a Median name who was also nicknamed Cyraxes. Oh, okay, so you're theorizing that Gobrius and Cyraxes might even be the same person, with Cyraxes being the more Persian name and Gobrius being the more Median name. That's interesting. My issue with this is that I didn't find a lot of stuff on Cyraxes that didn't contradict with each other, or Gobrius that didn't contradict as well. So I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but essentially what I'm getting is it's tough. And if you dig deep into it, there's a reason that this is an ongoing historical question, because all of the potential solutions where you say, this guy has this name, that's exactly who it was, there's a problem with every single one of those direct attributions or associations. And then the problem with the Darius the Mede is just forgotten to history, but was accurately recorded by Daniel as being a short-lived governor there, is that it's an argument from silence. I mean, it's pretty hard to disprove what I just said there. So challenges to all of it. I get it. Pray R says Darius the Mede was a missing emperor of the Mede dynasty. John Levitre writes, as a variation on your last suggestion, is it possible that leaders who came after him expunged his name from history? It happened to at least one Egyptian pharaoh. Yes, it did. I know what pharaoh you are talking about, which I guess means the expunging didn't go as well as the Egyptians had hoped. Realmless writes, Cyraxes II is definitely my preferred theory for Darius the Mede. However, there's enough evidence for a Medo-Persian civil war shortly before the war with Lydia that I find it fairly probable that there was some sort of falling out between Cyrus and Artaxerxes. And that this would result in a war where Darius would choose the side of Cyrus. I think maybe you're thinking of someone different than Artaxerxes there. But you are correct in saying there's a lot of evidence to suggest serious turmoil before the Medo-Persian conquest of Babylon, between and among the Medes and the Persians, and then additional crazy amounts of turmoil afterwards. Again, we're going to break all of that down when we finish up the book of Matthew and pivot into the book of Esther. Okay, not the last one, but I'm reading it anyway. Madeline writes, awesome video, thanks for all this. But also, we're still waiting for another Ironwood Rhino episode. That is completely fair. And in the interim, I've published what I think might be the very best Ironwood Rhino episode so far, including the first song of the album that is inspired fully by the Ironwood Rhino podcast. It's really good. It's called Spook Light. If you haven't listened to it yet, I'll give you a link here. It's awesome. All right, there's a side plug. Hang on. One more comment to land the plane here on the Darius the Mede question. We'll call it a day. Let me see. We're going with this one. California Girl writes, Annals of the World, quote, Darius the Mede, son of Ahasuerus, or Cyraxes, son of Hystages, took over the kingdom which Cyrus had conquered and given to him, so his alternate name, she writes, in history was Cyraxes. Well, it looks like that was the opinion of James Usher, who was a scholar and Anglican church leader in the 17th century, who wrote this book called Annals of the World. It came out in Latin, and then I think there was a version that came out a few years later in English. Yeah, I'm not 100% positive on that, but that feels right to me. Whatever the case, Annals of the World has been available and more widely circulated in just the last 20 years or so. And Ussher is associated with a pretty literal, pretty detailed read chronologically on history. And it's a worthwhile work. It's a really important work in the history of Christian thought and biblical scholarship. But Ussher was also limited in what sources he would have had access to. And so while that is his opinion, we still have to take that as an opinion rooted in a limited set of sources. So Ussher thought that Darius was Cyaxares. Is that the case? I'm not sure that sways me one way or the other, but it's a really good note on a historical opinion from the 17th century about this. Nice job, California girl. Good digging. That was fun. Thank you to everybody who weighed in on the Darius the Mede question. I am unapologetically starting to weave in a bit more conversation about Persian history in the 6th century and the 5th century BC, because we're going to be flipping into that era in, I don't know how many months or how many episodes, but that's where we're headed next. So I've had fun poking around there, and I enjoyed our little detour in that direction on the YouTube channel and over here. I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate all of you being around for a bonus episode. Thank you a gigantic mountainous ton for all of the reviews on iTunes and your different podcast apps. Every time you go and do that, this thing gets in front of more people. I see it happen. So I cannot thank you enough, both for the kind words that you write and also for the fact that you would take the time to rate and review this podcast at all. That is ginormous. All right, we're back to the book of Matthew, and I will see you on Monday with that. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.